Hi, good to see you all. Hello, folks online. Good to see you too. I'm glad to be back. Had a wonderful retreat up at the temple. So, as you know, I highly recommend checking out retreats up there if you can. They're really wonderful. So, hello, welcome. Nice to see you. Are you Nikita? Nikita, so nice to meet you. I wasn't around when Nikita started up, but she's checking out the class, so please welcome her. Nice to have you. I was just saying, Nikita, how lovely it is up at the temple, which I know you know, and you've been up there and love it there. So, yes, if you can, do a retreat up there or go up for a nice little weekend. It doesn't have to be a retreat weekend. It could be a course. Or you can even just go up on your own and get a nice room and walk along the beautiful paths and eat the delicious vegetarian food they make. It's very, very nice. So hopefully I will bring back some wisdom for you. And what we'll do today is carry on from what Alex taught last week, which was the centerpiece of the teaching last week was beginning to learn the process of the practice of taking and giving, which I've mentioned before is traditionally in Tibetan called Tonglen, and we're focusing on the first half of that, which is the taking part of the practice. So we're going to, because this practice is somewhat mysterious, and it can be challenging in that our self-cherishing is activated very, very strongly and wants to fight us doing this. We start with a, I think, very beautiful and extremely skillful method of taking on our own future suffering in this meditation. I won't repeat everything that Alex said last week, of course, but I do want to just mention a few key points before we enter into the meditation process. So, first of all, just allow yourself, before you're doing this process, to remember we're a work in process. We are not fixed. So part of this meditation is speaking to that very fact that we are ever changing, and that if we are experiencing suffering now, we can feel confident and quite happy to know that we can create causes so that that suffering in the future will no longer trouble us. In other words, we can purify the causes of future suffering now. And that is, in general, partly, or one way to think about Buddhist practice, which is that we are, in many different ways, creating the causes for the reduction of our future, of our current suffering and our future suffering. And of course, a lot of that happens because we're focusing on reducing the suffering of others. So it's this alchemical process by which, by focusing on others, and that's the beauty and the magic of this particular presentation in Universal Compassion, by focusing on others, we rather magically purify all of the causes of our own suffering. And we're doing it through this combination of compassion and wisdom. So this process there's a three-part process to this meditation, and I'll just mention the three parts to you now so that I'll just give you some cues and then you can do the meditation yourself. But the first thing to do is that we focus on all living beings in general and imagine, I'm sorry, is that right? No, that's from this week. We begin by, I love this, we begin by developing a feeling of compassion for all living beings. As explained, we talked about that for a couple of weeks prior. So we develop this feeling of compassion for all living beings, and we allow our whole mind to become one with this compassion. So one of the key elements to this practice is starting from a place of compassion. So we're immediately getting ourselves out of our own little world and putting ourselves into the world of others, recognizing that there are innumerable beings in our world, many of whom we can see, some of whom we know about, and some of whom we can't see and don't know about. But they're there, and they've been with us since beginningless time, and they've all been our mothers, and they're all suffering in one way or the other. So we can, however you find it easiest to develop a mind of compassion, that's up to you. Some people like to focus on one person and just recognize the suffering that this one person or this one animal I know is experiencing is true for all people, all animals, all beings at one point or another. Even if they're right now experiencing good conditions, eventually the karma for those good conditions will peter out. It will run its course, and some negative conditions will arise because of that karma ripening. So we're all subject to this unending cycle of pleasurable moments, unpleasurable moments, and sometimes excruciating suffering. And so we can use our understanding of this to bring to mind, to generate this mind of compassion, and we allow that compassion to fill our mind. That's the first step. The second step is, and I'll read this aloud, is to make a resolution. Once we've created the compassion in our mind, which, by the way, I know Alex did a teaching on compassion last week, and she told me a little bit about what she covered, but compassion is not a depressed mind. It's actually a mind that's full of energy. You don't become stuck in the sorrows of the suffering that other people are experiencing, but instead you allow yourself to be motivated and energized to be of service. That's where the joy comes, because everything is impermanent, including what seems like terrible, unending suffering for others. It's not permanent, and we do have the power to alleviate that suffering for others. That's, for me, a joyful mind. If I know I can do something about a problem, then I'm ready, willing, and able to dive in and do it. If it's a hopeless case, yeah, that would be cause for despair. But it's not. We have this capacity because our mind is unimaginably powerful. So we allow this resolution to arise in our mind. And the resolution, as presented in the book, says, with this present body and mind. So the self that I'm experiencing now in this lifetime, with this present body and mind, I will take on all my future sufferings. By doing this, so we're recognizing, by the way, that the step that is not clear, that is explained in the paragraph, is, we develop this mind of compassion. We are part of that. We are part of the suffering world of samsara. We have a mind that is subject both to joy and to sorrow. And so recognizing that we will, at some point, if not even now, are going to be experiencing unbearable suffering in this lifetime and future lifetimes, we say, okay, I am going to experience this suffering, but there's something I can do about it. I'm going to take that suffering on now to my current body and mind. By doing this, I will purify all my negative karma and thereby avoid having to experience these sufferings in the future. Then I will be able gradually to take on the suffering of others. So we do this not only with the intention and wish to free ourselves from future sufferings, but recognizing by doing this, we're laying the groundwork. We're strengthening our mind and our capacity so that we can do this for others. So it's a multifunctional meditation. And it's not just about us. It's definitely about others, in that the others are going to benefit from our future self. If our future self is wise, loving, compassionate, untroubled by the appearances in samsara, but able to carry on with our practice, generate love and compassion, so forth, we will be of huge benefit to others down the road if we ourselves are strong, powerful, and free of delusions. So by doing this, we're actually benefiting not just ourselves, but others. So it's not a selfish thing to be taking on our own suffering. It's a benefit for us and benefit for others. And then, having made this resolution, I'll read the resolution and you can think about it. First, we'll generate compassion for everyone, including ourselves. Then I'll read the resolution and you can contemplate the resolution and take on this determination in your mind. And then, the third part is, having made this resolution, we imagine that all the sufferings we will have to experience in the remainder of this life, such as the sufferings, excuse me, I have a weird thing in my throat. So you have a current suffering, which is a strange voice, such as the sufferings of sickness, old age, and death assume the aspect of black smoke. This gathers into one great mass and dissolves into our heart, and we strongly imagine that it destroys our self-cherishing mind and our negative karma. So, and the feeling that we generate once we do this visualization is joy. Joy that we have eradicated our future suffering and the causes of future suffering in our mind. And we can be hugely joyful. And a lot of this, and I'll talk a little bit more about this after we do the meditation and as we proceed in the text. But a lot of this has to do with not being intellectual about it and not thinking about it, but allowing yourself to give over to the power of the meditation, give over to the power of the visualization, and to the power of the lineage which has provided this meditation, and allow yourself to feel that this is so. Just give it a whirl. It begins in your imagination. That's where everything begins anyway, as we have heard many times. So this is an imaginative experience, but it's also a heart-based experience. So allow your heart to be moved by this, to feel happy. Let yourself be super happy that you have prevented yourself from experiencing suffering down the road in this lifetime. Now, there is a part B to that, which is, if you wish, you can imagine visualizing all of your the suffering of your future lives, and bring that in and use the visualization and imagine that. You need not. If you want to just stick with this lifetime, feel free. I'm not going to cue you one way or the other. You can choose whether or not you want to work with this lifetime, or you want to work with this lifetime and then the countless future lifetimes. It somewhat depends on your level of experience with this meditation, which one you choose. It also depends on how much time there is. So, so without further ado, this is what we'll be doing in the meditation, and then we'll carry on afterwards with the rest of the text. Okay, so let's begin by bringing our focus inwards. We allow our mind to settle. we can connect with Buddha Shakyamuni through the recitation of the liberating prayer.
O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, you who love all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us to the liberating path. Your body is a wish-fulfilling jewel. Your speech is supreme purifying nectar, and your mind is refuge for all living beings. With folded hands I turn to you, supreme unchanging friend. I request from the depths of my heart, please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind, and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you, may all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may holy Dharma flourish forevermore.
We've aligned our mind with Buddha Shakyamuni's enlightened mind through the prayer. And we can now spend a few minutes experiencing refuge in the three jewels: Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, and Sangha jewel. And then we envision that all of our close family and friends are seated around us and extending outwards all other living beings. And we recognize that these are our kind mothers. Beings just like us who are trapped in samsara, who experience lifetime after lifetime of difficulties and pain and suffering, trapped by self-grasping ignorance and delusions. And we recognize our own Buddha nature, our own potential for enlightenment. And we generate a mind of bodhicitta, the wish to cultivate our potential to become a Buddha, so that we can lead others to liberation and enlightenment. Allow ourselves to stay with this bodhicitta wish for a couple of minutes before we start the prayers. And then with this bodhicitta motivation at our heart, we recite the prayers for meditation.
I and all sentient beings until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. I and all sentient beings until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. I and all sentient beings until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Through the virtues I collect by giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Through the virtues I collect by giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Through the virtues I collect by giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all. May everyone be happy. May everyone be free from misery. May no one ever be separated from their happiness. May everyone have equanimity, free from hatred and attachment. In the space before me, is the living Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, like the full moon surrounded by stars. With my body, speech, and mind, humbly I prostrate, and make offerings both set out and imagined. I confess my wrong deeds from all time, and rejoice in the virtues of all. Please stay until samsara ceases, and turn the wheel of Dharma for us. I dedicate all virtues to great enlightenment. The ground sprinkled with perfume and spread with flowers, the great mountain for land, sun and moon, seen as a Buddha land and offered thus. May all beings enjoy such pure lands. I offer without any sense of loss the objects that give rise to my attachment, hatred, and confusion, my friends, enemies, and strangers, our bodies and enjoyments. Please accept these and bless me to be released directly from the three poisons. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. The path begins with strong reliance on my kind teacher, source of all good. Oh, bless me with this understanding to follow him with great devotion. This human life with all its freedoms extremely rare, with so much meaning. Oh, bless me with this understanding all day and night to seize its essence. My body like a water bubble decays and dies so very quickly. After death come results of karma, just like the shadow of a body. With this firm knowledge and remembrance, bless me to be extremely cautious, always avoiding harmful actions and gathering abundant virtue. Samsara's pleasures are deceptive, give no contentment, only torment. So please bless me to strive sincerely to gain the bliss of perfect freedom. Oh, bless me so that from this pure thought come mindfulness and greatest caution, to keep as my essential practice the doctrine's root, the pratimoksha. Just like myself, all my kind mothers are drowning in samsara's ocean. Oh, so that I may soon release them, bless me to train in bodhicitta. But I cannot become a Buddha by this alone, without three ethics. So bless me with the strength to practice the Bodhisattva's ordination, by pacifying my distractions and analyzing perfect meanings. Bless me to quickly gain the union of special insight and quiescence. When I become a pure container through common paths, bless me to enter the essence, practice of good fortune, the supreme vehicle, Vajrayana. The two attainments both depend on my sacred vows and my commitments. Bless me to understand this clearly and keep them at the cost of my life. By constant practice in 4 sessions, the way explained by holy teachers. Oh, bless me to gain both the stages which are the essence of the Tantras. May those who guide me on the good path and my companions all have long lives. Bless me to pacify completely all obstacles, outer and inner. May I always find perfect teachers and take delight in holy Dharma. Accomplish all grounds and pass swiftly and gain the state of Vajradhara. From the hearts of all the holy beings, streams of light and nectar flow down, granting blessings and purifying.
We envision from the hearts of all the enlightened beings in the space in front. We envision that from their hearts come purifying nectars and lights. These enter through our crown and fill our body, purifying any obstacles to engaging in the practice of taking. So any doubts, any fears, any concerns, any karmic obstructions, they're all purified through the blessings of the holy beings. And then we can imagine also coming from the hearts of the enlightened beings, orange lights and nectars that flow into our crown and fill our body. And these blessings are in the nature of wisdom. And we allow ourselves to feel blessed, to feel enabled, our wisdom activated, our compassion activated. We're in connection with all the enlightened beings. So Venerable Geshe-la suggests that we begin this meditation by developing a feeling of compassion for all living beings, and let our whole mind become one with this compassion. And we can include ourselves in this compassion. We ourselves are a samsaric being with negative karmic imprints and delusions and self-grasping ignorance. And as a result, we ourselves and all others who are not yet enlightened are naturally going to experience suffering of various types and various intensities. And there is no escape while we're still bound by self-grasping ignorance. So we allow the mind of compassion for ourselves and others to arise in our hearts. To prepare our minds for being able to take on the suffering of others, we can start by taking on our own future suffering. We make the resolution. With this present mind and body, I will take on all my future sufferings. By doing this, I will purify all my negative karma and thereby avoid having to experience these sufferings in the future. Then I will be able gradually to take on the sufferings of others. So we can spend a few minutes contemplating this resolution and allowing a determination to arise in our hearts, to engage in this practice of taking on our future suffering. Having made this resolution, we imagine that all the sufferings we will have to experience in the remainder of this life, such as the sufferings of sickness, old age, and death, assume the aspect of black smoke. This gathers into one great mass and dissolves into our heart. And we strongly imagine that it destroys our self-cherishing mind and our negative karma. We develop the conviction that we have destroyed our self-cherishing mind and purified our negative karma, and then generate joy. We meditate on this feeling of joy for as long as possible. So we now have some time on our own to engage in this visualization. Our object of meditation is the conviction that we've destroyed our self-cherishing through this practice, destroyed all of our negative karmic imprints. And in doing so, we feel the mind of joy. And now, when you're ready, you can arise from your meditation. Okay, thank you. So, read from the root text. We're still in the conventional bodhicitta section, so I'll just read that section, page 157, bottom of 157 to top of 158. The main practice training in the two bodhicittas. Training in conventional bodhicitta. Gather all blame into one. Meditate on the great kindness of all. Train alternately in giving and taking. Begin the sequence by taking from your own side. Mount these two upon the breath. The three objects, three poisons, and three virtuous roots are the brief instruction for the subsequent attainment. To remember this, train in every activity by words. And then again, just to briefly go through the relevant portion of the condensed meaning of the commentary, I'll read from the bottom of 162 to the middle of 163. The main practice, training in the two bodhicittas, has two parts. Training in conventional bodhicitta, training in ultimate bodhicitta. Training in conventional bodhicitta has two parts. The practice in the meditation session, the practice in the meditation break. The practice in the meditation session has 6 parts. Meditating on equalizing self and others, contemplating the dangers of self-cherishing, contemplating the benefits of cherishing others, meditating on exchanging self with others, meditating on taking and giving, meditating on bodhicitta. Meditating on taking and giving has 2 parts, taking by means of compassion, giving by means of love. So we're in the taking by means of compassion section, and it's pervaded by an understanding of how compassion from a Mahayana perspective is not just wishing others to be free from suffering, but wishing ourselves to gain the capacity to protect others from their suffering. That's the Mahayana wish. It's not just this abstracted, I wish everyone would be free, but I myself am going to do what I can to help others be free from their suffering. So that's where we are right now, and we're in the middle of this quite extraordinary practice of taking by means of compassion. It can be challenging, definitely, for some. If you're not familiar with it, it can be very confusing and radical. I guess it's always radical, but it depends on whether or not you like that radical quality or you feel a little uncomfortable with it. There is a heroic quality to this practice because what you're really doing is you're saying, I am willing to take on suffering in the interests of benefiting all living beings and helping free them from their suffering. I'm willing to do that. That's my life's purpose. That's my life's goal. Now, this is all, of course, predicated on understanding the nature of self, which is where people get caught up and why this is why this was a secret practice for a very long time prior to Geshe Chekawa bringing it into the world more publicly through this text. Because if we don't understand the nature of the self, which is that it is mere name, it's an imputation. We essentially create the self moment by moment with our mind. If we don't understand that, then taking on the suffering of all living beings seems absolutely ludicrous and impossible and just absurd. How could I possibly do that? First of all, just little old me. I'm too small, too weak. There's no way. I have enough problems. I can't take on the suffering of all living beings. But this entire practice is pervaded by profound wisdom. So because we're linear creatures, right? And we hear in a linear way and we learn in a linear way, Geshe Chekawa and had to present the compassion and taking first, and we'll be presenting the wisdom later. But really, the compassion and the wisdom, are completely integrated in this practice. You cannot have one at the other and have it be effective and authentic. So this is a compassion practice, but it also demands our approaching this with a mature spiritual outlook and some understanding of emptiness, which we will study more formally in a couple of chapters, but also with a relaxed, playful quality. It's like, let's try these teachings on for size. Let's see what they're about. Let's see how they might affect my mind and my practice. So it's very demanding. These teachings are not roll off a log, easy peasy stuff, but they're extremely profound. They have the capacity to profoundly change who we are and how we relate to the world. So although right now we're experiencing suffering from actions that we engaged in our previous lives, actions of body, speech, and mind, right? Those karmic imprints were placed on our mental continuum, and now some of them are ripening in this lifetime in the form of our various sufferings. Some of these sufferings are quite trivial in the grand scheme of things, a little discomfort, the chairs aren't all that great, my sock keeps falling down, the coffee didn't get heated to the right temperature, or the grind wasn't quite right. Those are sufferings for us. We actually get pretty caught up in these things. And there are other sufferings, profound sufferings. Some of them in this human realm that we are experiencing together now, but some of them in other realms, which we'll be talking about shortly. So the point of that is that we've engaged in these actions. Right now we're experiencing the fruits of those actions, sometimes in the form of pleasure, sometimes in the form of suffering. But we're not obliged to experience the sufferings of our future lives, our future in this life or future lives. We can purify them. And this is a purification practice. This is purifying the negative karma that will ripen at some point. It will. It will either ripen or we have to purify it. That's how these karmic seeds work. So we're going to purify. All right, so let's take a look at the material where Alex left off, which is in my edition on the bottom of page 41. Venerable Geshe writes, when we feel ready to begin taking on the sufferings of others, there are two ways in which we can do this. So the idea is that we practice taking on our future suffering until we get familiar with it, we feel comfortable with it, we're not freaked out at the idea of taking on suffering. We're not taking it onto ourselves, we're taking it onto our deluded minds, our self-cherishing in particular, and all of our negative karma. So we're not taking on the suffering ourselves. But there are two ways to take on the suffering of others when we feel ready to do so. Either we can focus on all living beings in general and imagine taking on their sufferings, or we can focus on an individual being or on a specific group of beings and imagine taking on their particular sufferings. To practice the first method, we regard all living beings as our kind mothers and think. So I referenced kind mothers in the opening meditation. Geshe-la is referencing it here. He presumes that you have an understanding of the teachings that all living beings are our mothers. If not, there's a beautiful section on it in Joyful Path of Good Fortune. But it is one way in which we develop minds of profound love and compassion, is by viewing everyone as our mother. So this particular meditation, we regard all living beings as our kind mothers and think, all these mother beings are drowning in samsara's ocean, experiencing unbearable miseries repeatedly over a long period of time. How wonderful it would be if they could be released from this deep ocean of suffering. May they be released. I myself will release them. With this strong, compassionate motivation, we think, may the sufferings and negative karma of all living beings ripen upon me, and thus may they all experience instant release from suffering and its causes. So this is the format of taking on suffering of others. And there are different variations on it, as we'll see as we go through the rest of the chapter, but it's all pretty much the same. You start with this compassionate understanding, this recognizing that all living beings are suffering in the ocean of samsara, lifetime after lifetime. So that's the compassionate recognition. And then there's this wish embedded in this meditation. How wonderful it would be if they could be released from this deep ocean of suffering. So you start with a recognition that's characterized by compassion, and then a wish arises. How wonderful it would be if they could be free forever, not just temporarily, but forever. May they be released. And that's a prayer. May they be released. And then finally, it ends with a resolution. I myself will release them. So we go from a recognition, a compassionate recognition, to a wish, to a prayer, to a determination. And then we have this strong, very powerful compassionate motivation, and we say, and we then engage in the practice, which is the same as we did before, which is you imagine all the sufferings, physical, mental, all the various sufferings of aging, sickness, death, and so forth, the sorrows, the dissatisfaction, the discontent, the frustrations, all of them from all living beings coming together in a mass of dark smoke and coming down and eradicating our own self-cherishing and negative karmic imprints. It's almost like a chemical reaction where all the suffering meets our self-cherishing and they both kind of implode and destroy each other. It's kind of like a superhero thing. So one of the keys on this practice is, first of all, as I said, to just kind of go with it and enjoy the imaginative qualities of it and allow yourself to basically surrender to the power of the visualization and the power of the practice. One of the things that Kadam Morton talked about years ago when he taught this book to us, is he said it's important to find something in your heart that moves you about this. So that's up to you as an individual meditator. It's not mine to say, like, what will move your heart. But if it remains an abstracted intellectual process, it doesn't have much power. It doesn't have a lot of oomph. So find something that touches your heart very deeply. It could be your grandmother, for instance, who is beloved and quite elderly and losing her eyesight and living precariously in some way, maybe a little bit lonely, maybe a little bit isolated, losing her, arthritis, whatever it may be. Find someone whom you can relate to and allow your heart to be touched. And recognize that this practice, although it will not relieve, it could technically, it could relieve their suffering in the here and now. And I have seen an example of that. I don't know if it was coincidence, but I have seen it happen. But ultimately, this is a long-term project. This is basically, I'm creating the power in my mind to become like Buddha and be able to bless the minds of others and help them be free from their suffering. So it's a long-term proposition, and so what we need to do is find a place where we can get some traction. So maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a sibling who's struggling right now, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's your own children, maybe it's neighbors, maybe it's a group of people right now who are experiencing conflict, conditions of war, huge deprivation. Maybe it's folks who are homeless. Maybe it's people who have a particular type of illness. You can pick. You don't have to do all living beings if that's too much for you and too abstract. So part of the thing of this practice is to do it skillfully and do what works for you, because there are no rules that you have to follow. They're just guidelines of what could be useful. So with this strong prayer, we imagine that the suffering and negative karma of all living beings gather together in the aspect of black smoke, which dissolves into our heart and completely destroys our self-cherishing. We develop the strong conviction, I have now released all living beings from the ocean of samsara and have destroyed my self-cherishing mind. We hold this conviction for a while and then generate joy. We meditate single-pointedly on this joy for as long as possible. So you'll see the pattern, which is that the object of meditation for each one of these examples of how to take on the suffering of others or the suffering of our own future life, the object of meditation is joy for each one. That's where it's leading, a joyful recognition, I have freed others from their suffering, and I've extinguished my own self-cherishing. It's a total win-win. And we can have this faith that we do have the power to do this because of our connection to the Buddhas. They do have incredible power to bless minds of others, to bring them from, that's their function, to bless their minds and give them mental peace, and to bring to all of us the means by which we escape from samsara. So because of that connection that we have with them, the practice of taking and giving does have power to benefit others. And it's not a burden because it's based in love and compassion. If it weren't, it would be a heavy lift. If you don't love someone, it's pretty hard to say, and I'm going to take on all your suffering. It would be a phony action, really. It's like, I don't love you, but I'll take all your suffering. It doesn't really wash. It's hard to buy that. So you need to, that's why there are these building blocks of equalizing self with others, recognizing the disadvantages of self-cherishing, recognizing the advantages of cherishing others, exchanging self with others. These are all building us up to a point where we have not only the capacity, but the wish to remove the suffering from others. If we are identifying with others as being more important than ourselves, all other living beings more important than I am, their happiness matters, their suffering, their freedom from suffering matters. Of course, we're going to want to take their suffering away from them, right? So, and you can see that in your own life. For someone that you really love, you would do anything to take their suffering away from them. For someone you feel neutrally about, maybe not so much. And that's okay, that's a realistic place to be, and just recognize that the movement that we're making is from this place of what about me, to this place about, which is all about you. And the irony, or I should say the paradox, not an irony, the paradox is that when we get out of our own way, when we leave our own self-cherishing prison, we actually free ourselves from all the suffering that we're afraid of experiencing. Like we're so afraid of suffering. And the very thing that keeps us suffering is our fear of suffering. So there's some mental jujitsu that happens in these teachings, and that's why they're subtle, they're nuanced, they're profound, they're challenging, and they are powerful. And they're very, very beautiful and very inspiring when we are able to either give ourselves over to them and be playful with it, serious play, right? We can have a serious and yet playful mind, and see what the effects are in our own mind and our own heart. That's what Buddha exhorts us to do: is try it out yourself. Don't just listen to me. Do it. Do it from your side, which is why we have these meditations. Yeah, Sandra, sure. Okay. Yeah.
You are mentioning now about fear. How do you deal, you start doing this meditation with a specific person I was just imagining doing it with someone who is going through something that I am very fearful that I will go through at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And just the thought of doing it, and I love this meditation, by the way, but I think because feels so close, I felt like panic for a moment, like, wow. So how do you do that? Do you just postpone that case, or you just
of course it's personal, right? It's like how strong are you feeling in your practice and where do you want to go? But I think the key is always, and forgive me because I'm going to just use a Kadam Mortonism here, which is who feels fearful. Find the self that feels fearful. That's why emptiness is so important, because there's actually no self to feel fearful for. It's a construct. And the idea that we have this self that we need to protect is illusory. It's an illusory self. The self that we normally see doesn't exist, and that's the self that feels fear. So my suggestion on that, if you want to go there and you feel comfortable doing that, is, put this aside, do a little meditation. So it's interesting, you can say to yourself, it's interesting that I develop fear about developing the very, let's say it's the sufferings of old age, like arthritis. I really don't want to feel arthritis, so I'm a little scared to do that taking with my elder friend or relative. Aha, fear is arising. Maybe do some meditation on that self and try to find the self that feels the fear. There's also some non-emptiness recognition, which is this body is impermanent and it is contaminated and it is going to experience physical pain and suffering, almost inevitably. I mean, no matter how healthy your lifestyle is, there is likely going to be some pain involved down the road. You might have really, really good karma in this life, and some people do, and really escape that altogether, but I don't know, just dental pain. Just think about that. We all have, unless you have absolutely amazing teeth, which is another karmic blessing, there's pain arising, and let's say you're a great athlete, but you twist your ankle badly or you rip your ACL when you're skiing or something, there's pain involved with this body. So there's a recognition of the nature of the body, which is it's impermanent and it's contaminated. And our minds also impermanent, also contaminated. So our minds, which are sharp when we're young, are not so sharp as we get older. The memory starts going, the capacity to maintain multiplicitous activities and ideas all at once start to go. It's unpleasant, and that's the nature of the samsaric body and mind. Whether or not we're born as a human or in any of the other realms, which are really far worse. So, yeah, fear may arise, and it's a great thing to look at. Anything that arises is always good to look at. And part of this practice, part of Lojong in general, because Lojong there are a lot of ways to look at Lojong. There's actually a definition in the back, which I happened to stumble on. The glossary in the back is lovely, and you can just read through it occasionally. And Lojong is a Tibetan term literally meaning training the mind, a special lineage of instructions that came from Buddha Shakyamuni through Manjushri and Shantideva to Atisha and the Kadampa Geshis, which emphasizes the generation of bodhicitta through the practices of equalizing and exchanging self with others, combined with taking and giving. So taking and giving is crucial, as a crucial element of this, and understanding that samsara is in the nature of suffering. There's no getting around it. And Buddha is super clear on this. He does not whitewash what's going on with this. He said, samsara, having a contaminated mind that's contaminated by delusions, self-grasping ignorance, is in the nature of pain. And until we get out of samsara, basically see through the illusion of samsara, because there's no inherently existent samsara, so we're not literally getting out, but we are dismantling our belief in the appearances of samsara. Until we do that through our wisdom, we are going to suffer. So what are you going to do with your suffering? And most people decide to try to pretend it's not there, or complain endlessly about it, or some combination therein. Very few people actually make the choice to, with energy and optimism, tackle the underlying problem and apply the solution. That's what Buddha's about. So we are going to experience suffering. There's no doubt about it until we get liberated. When we get liberated, no more suffering. So let's get liberated. That's the whole point. So part of this is being willing to accept that. A lot of Buddha's practice, from my perspective, having been at it a while and fumbled my way to where I am now, which is a slightly better place than I was when I started off, I'm happy to say, but is recognizing a lot of this is accepting the truth of what Buddha said about the nature of samsara. It's essentially understanding true origins, true sufferings and true origins, understanding where our suffering is coming from. And then applying true paths to attain truth cessations, the Four Noble Truths. That's what we're up to. It's a big job. It's way bigger than, getting an senior vice president, a promotion to senior vice president in whatever company you work in. It's like that is easy, and who cares? I hate to tell you. If that's what you're going for, good luck to you, and I hope it works. And I hope you enjoy it, but that is not going to solve your problems. So this is the only thing that's going to solve our problems. And taking and giving is this, it is an alchemical practice that allows us to be present to the reality that there is suffering all around us, within our own hearts, minds, lives, bodies, and those of our loved ones. And to pretend that they're not going to experience suffering is just delusional. Not delusional. I guess it is delusional in that you're in denial, but it's just not realistic. It's just not. Buddha tells it like it is, and it's one of the things that people misunderstand about Buddhist practice and about what Buddha had to say. They think he's very, very negative. It's really grim. It's not grim, because he identifies the problem and gives the solution. And you cannot you cannot apply the solution if you don't know what the problem is. You can't, because you're doing this on your own. Nobody's doing it for you. It's your mind and your practice and your energy and your optimism or lack of optimism, whatever is operating at any one time. And you're going to have ups and downs. Again, Sampton was talking about last week when I was up there, he was talking about our practice has peaks and valleys. It has times where we're feeling really powerful and strong and ready to do these practices, and sometimes we're not in a strong place. We're not identifying with our potential and our possibilities. So the fear is there, but I mean, Sandra, you've been around a long time. You know there's productive fear and there's non-productive fear. And I think maybe when any of us is doing this practice, and I think you speak for a lot of us, check and see if fear arises in your mind. Ask yourself, is this a productive fear? Is this a fear that is leading me into engaging in practices that are going to bring the solution to bear? Or is this a fear that's going to sink me? It's going to make me feel depressed. It's going to make me feel basically that's obscuring, basically a self-cherishing based fear that's going to obscure the truth. Because if it is, then you can look at that. And part of it is being honest, is laying, there was a phrase in the notes I took from 4 years ago, and I studied this, I sound like so pompous. I don't mean this at all, I just got excited. I studied this 4 years ago when COVID just started. So there was a lot of fear going on at that point in March, April of 2020, a lot of fear. So Kadam Morton encouraged us to lay bare to ourselves our fears. Look at them. They're not unmanageable. They will give you a lot of information about what it is you're afraid of and what you're protecting. And what you are protecting is what is going to prevent all of us from making progress, spiritual progress, because basically we're just going to be coddling and nurturing this frightened self that's completely consumed by self-cherishing. That's what happens. So take a look. Expose your fears to the sunlight of your mind and let yourself look at them. Nothing is unmanageable. When you're in refuge, nothing's unmanageable. The Buddhas are with you every step of the way. There's nothing they want more than for you to conquer this demon of self-cherishing. Nothing. And when we do, we'll be free. And then we can help our loved ones be free. Right now, we can't help that much. We can help a little bit. We can. And we do. We do our best. But why not create the conditions where we can be even more powerful, more helpful, more inspiring, more comforting, and lead folks from their ignorance and confusion to a place of freedom and wisdom. It might not happen in this lifetime, but you have strong karmic connections. So whether it's with your grandparents or your best friend or your kids, you have strong karma with them. And if you can empower your own mind, you can help them. And that's what this is for. This is to empower us. And it definitely can raise all sorts of concerns and fears. So thank you, Sandra, for expressing what I think probably a lot of people. And by the way, we have a discussion class next week. So I think it'd be great to have a conversation about this. It's really juicy stuff. And the more you're willing to, as Sandra did, be honest in the context of our class, the more fruitful the discussion is, because it's real. When you ask a question like that, it's real for you, as opposed to sort of an intellectualized, abstracted perspective. So thank you. Okay, so let's carry on a little bit with this meditation. So this first meditation, you're using all living beings, and as I mentioned, you can pick particular groups of living beings. You can pick, animals who are suffering in factory farming. You can pick anybody you want. Little dogs that were abandoned, adopted and then abandoned after COVID. There's lots of animals. Birds who are eating poisoned gunshot. That's what the condors are all dying of out in the West. There's just so many living beings that we can develop compassion for and we can use as the basis of our meditation. What touches you most particularly? So the second method is to focus on specific groups of beings. And this particular, I'll read and then explain. Second method is to focus on specific groups of beings, such as the beings who inhabit each of the 6 realms of samsara, and imagine taking on their particular sufferings. We begin by focusing on the beings suffering in the hot hells, and think, these beings who are all my kind mothers have no choice but to experience the torment of extreme heat for many eons. How wonderful it would be if they could be released from these terrible sufferings as quickly as possible. May they be released. I myself will release them. With this compassionate mind, we think, may I take on all their suffering and negative karma, and as a result, may they be completely released from suffering and its causes. With this heartfelt prayer, we imagine that all their suffering and negative karma gather together in the aspect of black smoke, which dissolves into our heart and completely destroys our self-cherishing. We develop the conviction, I have now released all beings in the hot hells from their suffering and have destroyed my self-cherishing mind. We hold this conviction for a while and then generate joy. We meditate on this joy for as long as possible. I'm going to read the next section and then pause because these are both hell-being meditations, and I'll talk for a minute or two about the hells, but then turn it over to you. And I'll talk much more after our discussion in the 2 weeks from now about these various realms. To take on the suffering of the beings in the cold hells, we focus on them and think, all these mother beings have to experience the unbearable suffering of cold for many eons. How wonderful it would be if they could be released from this suffering. May they be released. I myself will release them. With this sincere prayer, we imagine that all their suffering and negative karma gather together in the aspect of black smoke, which dissolves into our heart and completely destroys our self-cherishing. We develop the conviction, I have now released all beings in the cold hells from their suffering and have destroyed my self-cherishing mind. We hold this conviction for a while and then generate joy. We meditate on this joy for as long as possible. So you can see the pattern is very clear. It's the same meditation. It's almost like an incantation in which we're changing the specifics, but the meditation remains the same. And in these 2 meditations, we're specifically focusing on all the beings in the various hell realms. And there are many and countless beings in the hell realms. And just so I'll read briefly from How to Transform Your Life about these realms, and I'll give some more commentary next week on that, and not next week, because that's the discussion class, but the week after on them. But I'll just read a little bit from the karma section of How to Transform Your Life. And it says here, essentially, at the time of our death, we know that karmic seeds will ripen, and it'll bring us into, basically we'll have an experience of an intermediate state or a bardo state. And that state is predicated on what karma ripens. So if negative seeds, while we are in the intermediate state, we experience different visions that arise from the karmic seeds that were activated immediately before death. If negative seeds were activated, these visions will be nightmarish. But if positive seeds were activated, they will be predominantly pleasant. In either case, when the karmic seeds have fully ripened, they impel us to take rebirth in one or other of the 6 realms of samsara. The 6 realms are actual places in which we can be reborn. They are brought into existence through the power of our actions or karma. So these are experiences. It's interesting, he says here, they're actual places, but he later says, he later clarifies that samsara is not it's a creation. Samsara is a creation of an impure mind. It's not an external prison. It's a prison made by our own mind. So although we experience these as actual places, they're not actual external places. So we can experience, if very negative karma ripens at the time of our death, we will have very unpleasant experiences in the bardo. It will be very, very unhappy. That's why POA practice is so great. If we land in a bad bardo place, hopefully somebody's going to do a very powerful POA for us to redirect our karma. But then we can land in a hell realm. And it basically says here, the lowest floor likens samsara to a house, and I'll explain. Again, I'll explain this later, but the lowest floor of the house of samsara is hell. The beings here experience unrelenting torment. Some hells are massive fire, thus the hot hells. Others are desolate regions of ice and darkness. Monsters conjured up by the minds of hell beings inflict terrible tortures on them. Their suffering continues unremittingly for what seems an eternity, but eventually the karma that caused the beings to be born in hell is exhausted, and the hell beings die and are reborn elsewhere in samsara. This is the important point. Hell is simply what appears to the most negative and distorted type of mind. It is not an external place that we can normally see, but it is like a nightmare from which we do not wake up for a very long time. For those living in hell, the sufferings of the hell realm are as real as our present experience of the human realm. So we'll talk more about the lower realms. It's important to understand what the lower realms are, how they function, why the logic for how it is that they exist. It's not something a lot of us like to think about, but it's super, super important. And if we're going to be, I just wanted to explain, that's the reason why we do taking and giving for the beings in the hell realms. There are innumerable beings in the various hell realms. And we can bless their minds through this practice of taking and giving. We can actually help them. And if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I read the passage about Geshe Chekawa, who prayed to be reborn in a hell so that he could benefit others. But because his mind was so pure, it was impossible for him to be reborn in a hell. There's no way that a mind that pure will have those hellish appearances to mind. It's just the only thing appearing to his mind is going to be this pure land of bliss. So the experience of our life depends on the nature of our mind. We get back to that again and again and again and again. So we can use our mind to purify our own karmic imprints, prevent our own hellish rebirths, our own future sufferings, and we can use our mind to protect and help others and save them from their suffering as well. So that's enough from me. Mike, because I want to just talk a little bit about the discussion class next week, let's do 10 minutes-ish for discussion. So over to you. Talk about the main points of the text. List a couple of them for your partner and talk about some of the things that really resonated for you, either challenging or positively, or both. Okay, and we'll be back in 10. Okay, great. Thank you all so much. So for next week, we're actually going to be, we're going to be having a discussion that is going to be led by Anne and Mike. Thank you both very much on that. I'm very pleased that you were able to do it. Appreciate that. So for those of you who will not be able to be here, please submit a question. Emanuela will be sending out a link to a Google form. Please submit a question if you will not be here. If you will be here and you've already come up with it, it doesn't have to be a question also. It can be sort of an area of discussion that you'd like to delve into a little bit more. Let us know either through the Google form that you'll be receiving, or please feel free to speak up in class. The questions that are pre-submitted are technically for folks who will not be in class. It's the equivalent of their participation. So if you're not going to be here, technically the commitment is to submit a question. We're pretty loose about enforcing that, are we not, Emmanuel? We're very loose about not enforcing that, but we ask you to please submit a question so that we know that you're exploring this material and thinking about it and wondering about it and intrigued by it. That's the function of submitting the questions. Others can submit areas of topics that they want to explore. That is a kindness to Mike and Anne, because then Mike and Anne have a little bit of time to ponder the areas that you'd like to discuss and the aspects that you want to hear about a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a question per se. It could be like, I am so intrigued by this. This is something I really wanted to talk about more. And then that can, and maybe a little bit of the reason why. You can align it with your own practice. That's always a really good way to think about the discussion class, is like, how am I meditating on this? Does anybody have any suggestions? Here's how I do it. Ideas, thoughts. It also could be how you're integrating this material in your daily life. How is it affecting your life in the world, with your friends, family, work, and so forth. So it's not meant to be a technical Q&A. It's really meant to be a free-form discussion that Anne and Mike generously moderate, but the burden isn't on them to carry the class. They'll give some thoughts, open it up to the rest of y'all to comment on, and I'll keep my mouth shut unless I really have a burning thing I want to say, or I feel like somebody's off base enough that I should add something in to help clarify. So that's for next week. And Anne and Mike, I'll just send you some guidelines so that you know how to think about preparing. You're both pros, so I don't really need to, but I will anyway. So that's for next week. The following week, we will continue with this taking and read up to the section on giving. We're going to complete it. The next couple of meditations, as you will see, and you've probably read ahead, are exactly like the ones we've just done, but with different groups of realm beings. So we'll go through that. We will meditate on all living beings. And for your comfort and preference, if you want to just adjust accordingly, if all living beings is too much for you, by all means do whatever group of people you wish to work with. That's fine. It's your meditation, not mine, so you should do what you want with that. I think that's it for now. Yeah, and
What are the pages
Ah.
for the discussion?
uh,
It's in it, but it starts at page 32.
the pages for the discussion will start at page 32. Emanuela will send that out in the email. So it's 32 through what we covered tonight. So, not a lot of pages, but a lot of really interesting stuff. So, okay, I think Jessica maybe. Oh, no, you're holding that.
I can go though. Mike and I had actually a really excellent discussion, and we sort of were talking about how making ourselves an other makes this so much easier, and sometimes it can even be helpful to make our past selves like our other, and how powerful that's been for both of us.
Nice. Yeah, we're constantly changing. That's what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. We're constantly changing our basis of imputation for self. So our past self, that's another person. It doesn't exist anymore. And now it's just a memory of another person, but we're not that person anymore. And if you do any, I highly recommend if there's a class on subtle impermanence. It's one of Gen Sampton's favorite topics, but Kadam Morton also teaches on it regularly. Subtle impermanence, you blink and you're a new, it's a new world and you're a new person. You do not even last for a moment. So your past self is another, your future self is another. So you don't have to get all overwrought about either one. It gives you a lot of freedom. Thank you. Hannah, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. So nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Well, Steph and I had a great discussion, and we were thinking about, just everything that's going on in the world and trying to have compassion and without getting overwhelmed. And, when he said, I don't want to think about, it's hard to be joyful. And I said, well, I agree, but the object of each of these meditations is the mind of joy. So how can we do that? And one of the things that we talked about, just maybe in a literal, maybe this is a little too literal, or maybe it's helpful, but we could generate joy when we're suffering or when we're witnessing others suffering, that at least that negative karma has burnt itself away, that they don't have to experience that particular suffering again. And that
Right.
could be a source of joy.
Absolutely. I like that. And so what Hannah and Steph were saying is that when suffering arises, your karma is ripening that for that suffering to essentially for you to experience that particular what's going on from a place of suffering. It has to do with the nature of the mind, which some of you all studied in the last book. But it's mental factor feeling. So feeling functions to experience karma. So when you have an unpleasant feeling, it simply is the function of karma ripening to experience something as unpleasant. It's not unpleasant from its own side. It's merely the mind experiencing the situation, the person, and so forth as unpleasant. So when that karma ripens, it's gone. It'll be gone. It will never. It can't re-ripen. Once it's ripened, it's been purified. So we can be joyful about that. That's gone. And maybe just to extend it a little bit is to recognize that we all have the potential to be completely free from all of that negativity, all of that karma ripening. So that our vision gets a little bit bigger from, well, at least that one's over. So thank you both for that. And we'll talk to Chuck now. Hey, Chuck.
Hi there. Not coincidentally, Elke brought to our discussion a point that I wanted to raise also. And that was near the end of the class, Julia, you asked us to consider whether fear is either instructive and productive or whether it's simply debilitating. And translating that into a meditation break suggestion, look at when you're fearful, is it something that's going to help you and direct you in a positive way? or is it simply debilitating and something you have to deal with?
Right. Well, and that's part of just being generally aware of what's arising in your mind and being attuned to it and mindful of it rather than just allowing whatever it arises to take you on a ride, right? So if you notice that a fear is arising, to explore, say, maybe to take a moment and say, what's going on here? What am I afraid of? Is there a Dharma perspective that I can bring to this that will help me see this in a helpful, skillful, productive, and beneficial way? So thank you so much. Yeah, these negative minds are not to be the negative minds are not to be feared. They're actually incredibly useful, and they give you a lot of information, and it can be very liberating to see that they need not drag you into the muck. That you can actually transcend the negative minds of fear and anxiety and anger and so forth through skillful Dharma practice, of course. Yeah, Mike.
My talk with Jess, also maybe as a meditation break, I've been practicing, speaking of the true alchemy that is Dharma, because if you do practice it, it is like alchemy essentially, but it's true. And being an other throughout the day, you know, if you practice it, you know, in a train car, all these cells, I'm an other. And there's something simplifying about it. There's something, you're not devaluing yourself, but it's interesting things come up, you know, and it really can make for a mind of love because you're mixing yourself with the world. You're no longer an other separate from all these people on this car or whatever. And that's something that's really helped me to sort of see these selves. They're going home too. They had a long day or whatever it is. But being the other, it's actually empowering. And you know, all you know, I always remember a teacher's advice. He says, "Oh, I'm just a lowly this or that." He's not being ironic. He sees himself. I mean, the fact that he is such a powerful teacher is because he was able to exchange himself with other.
Yeah.
So it's just something that we're maybe not used to. We're used to aggrandizing ourselves or maybe keeping ourselves at a distance. But it's almost like mixing ourselves with the world in a way that's maybe seems not comfortable, but actually interesting things come up.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great note to end on. Thanks, Mike and Jess and everyone. I appreciate it. Okay, so time to dedicate, and I think that's it. Emanuela, do I have anything else I need to? No, okay, so Emanuela will send out the link where you can add your topic that you'd like to discuss, and I'll be in touch with Mike and Ann with some suggestions. And enjoy your week. It's great to have you. Thanks.
Through the virtues I have collected, by practicing the stages of the path, may all living beings find the opportunity to practice in the same way. May everyone experience the happiness of humans and gods, and quickly attain enlightenment, so that samsara is finally extinguished. So that the tradition of Tsongkhapa, the king of the Dharma, may flourish. May all obstacles be pacified, and may all favorable conditions abound. Through the two collections of myself and others, gathered throughout the 3 destroyer of the horse of Mars. O venerable Guru Buddha, synthesis of all these truths, with my body, speech, and mind, respectfully I make request. Please grant your blessings to ripen and liberate myself and others, and bestow the common and supreme attainment. Sankappa, grand ornament of the scholars of the land of the snows, you are Buddha Shakyamuni and Vajradhara, the source of all attainments. Avalokiteshvara, the treasury of unobservable compassion. Manjushri, the supreme stainless wisdom. And Vajrapani, the destroyer of the horse of Mars. O venerable Guru Buddha, synthesis of all these rules, with my body, speech, and mind, respectfully I make request. Please grant your blessings to ripen and liberate myself and others, and bestow the common and supreme attainment. Sankappa, grand ornament of the scholars of the land of the snows, you are Buddha Shakyamuni and Vajradhara, the source of all attainments. Avalokiteshvara, the treasury of unobservable compassion. Manjushri, the supreme stainless wisdom. And Vajrapani, the destroyer of the horse of Mars. O venerable Guru Buddha, synthesis of all these truths, with my body, speech, and mind, respectfully I make request. Please grant your blessings to ripen and liberate myself and others, and bestow the common and supreme attainment.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Mike.
Are you joining us as a regular student?
Yeah,
So today's your fifth day. Welcome to Basic Best. Yeah. I will
We got meditation right before this as well.
Oh wow. Oh, you're in the previous class.
Well, I was. One of my friends from work
Okay.
was saying she really wanted to meditate, and I was like, excellent, let's go. I'm doing class at 6:45. You can come to the 6 o'clock. She's like, can I come to the 6:45? I was like, no. That is a different kind of
You're
class.
so active here. That's amazing.
Well, some days more than others.
You have time for real life?
Work and stuff.
This is actually my busy season. I'm an accountant.
This is like the most you're supposed